Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talk Nerdy. Today is Monday, December 15th, 2025, and I'm the host of the show, Dr. Cara Santa Maria. So typically, I would say this is the last episode of the year. I know I've been telling you that we will have our 2-week hiatus like we usually do, but I had the opportunity to put up another episode next week. It's actually going to be a re-release of an older episode with some new information about how we can give during these holiday times. So watch this space for that. In 1 week's time. So on December 22nd, we'll be posting that. But for today, we have a brand new one for you. And before we dive into it, I do want to thank those of you who make Talk Nerdy possible. Remember, this show is and will always be 100% free to download. And the way that we keep going is by relying on the support of individuals just like you. It's the holiday season. I know it's a tough time. So I appreciate just everything you guys have done throughout the year. And as always, I want to give it a shout out to the top patrons of the show. They include Chuck Blell, David J.E. Smith, Daniel Lang, Mary Neva, Anu Badavaj, David Compton, Brian Holden, Gabo J, Ulrika Hagman, Pasquale Gelati, Joe Wilkinson, Triangulum, Doug Petitpierre, and so many more. Thank you all so much for your support. Okay, what have we got today? So I had the opportunity to speak with Felice Frankel about her new book, Phenomenal Moments, Revealing the Hidden Science Around Us. Felice is a science photographer. She's also an author, and she's been working as a research scientist at MIT in the Department of Chemical Engineering, with support from the departments of Mechanical Engineering and Material Science and Engineering for a very long time. And she has produced images for every major outlet you know about. You've seen her photos in Nature, in Science, in National Geographic, in Scientific American, and so many others. She has a book series called The Visual Elements, which teaches visual communication to scientists and engineers. She's also a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and she's won a Guggenheim Fellowship and the Leonard Nilsson Award for Scientific Photography. Very, very accomplished. She's going to teach us about how to communicate science through images of the natural world. Again, her book is Phenomenal Moments, Revealing the Hidden Science Around Us. So without any further ado, here she is, Felice Frankel. Well, Felice, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, goodness. Thank you for inviting me, for goodness sake.
Absolutely. So it's looking like, let me see if my production calendar is correct here. I think this is the last episode of the year. It is, because I always take a 2-week hiatus around the holidays and then come back in January. So This is airing, we're time traveling a little bit because we're recording this in November before I leave on a vacation. But this is airing on December 15th, just in time for the holidays. And what a good book to be talking about in time for the holidays.
You are the best. To tell you the truth, I wouldn't mind having people take a look at the book, to be honest.
Absolutely. So the book, as I mentioned in the intro, is called Phenomenal Moments, Revealing the Hidden Science Around Us. And what I love is when I get to speak with experts and talented folks who are kind of combining different fields and who are very, very close to science and steeped in science, but entering into science from a different, I hate to be punny about it, but from a different lens. And so you, of course, are a science photographer, which is such an exciting job. And I want to know everything about that.
It's crazy exciting. And I really lucked out. I really do want your listeners to consider the impact of luck on our lives. It really was crazy how I got into it, and crazy in the sense that I fell into something that I love and continue to love. What happened was I do have a science background, so actually that's not trivial because I am able to talk to the researchers that I work with. Mm-hmm. And when I don't understand something, I say, "Hey, I don't understand this," and they love that, by the way. And so the way it all began was, frankly, as a child, I was always very curious about why things look the way they look. I was paying attention to that, the image of what I was looking at. And that pretty much stayed with me my whole life. I did, in fact, go into science in college. I don't have a graduate degree. I just have an undergraduate degree from Brooklyn College. And then my life turned around a little bit in the sense that I'm jumping a few years, but I became an architectural photographer. Now, what does that
Oh,
have to
okay.
do with any of this, right? Well, what happened was that I was given a fellowship at Harvard called a Loeb Fellowship, where there were seven of us. All the rest of the folks were designers or city planners, and I was an architectural photographer. And I got this year to do anything I wanted to do, it turned out. And they paid me, if you could believe that. And so it was quite remarkable. This is a mid career fellowship. And I realized how much I just missed science terribly. And here I was on a campus that had, amazing researchers and classes. And I invited myself to a class. I was told that this particular fellow was very good at visualizing what he was lecturing about. I had the audacity to go up to him after the lecture and asked him if I could invite myself to his lab. And he said, yeah, sure, probably trying to get rid of me. And I did get to his lab, and I met with his postdoc, Nick Abbott. They just got a paper accepted to Science magazine, which as you all know, is a pretty important publication.
Hmm.
I looked at their pictures and I said, we could do a little better. I didn't
Mm.
want to really come out and say they were lousy, but basically they got it. And so I worked with them to develop a different sample, let's call it that for now. And we got the cover.
Oh,
And
wow.
George Whitesides, whose lab this was, said to me, Felice, you're doing something that not a lot of people are doing.
Yeah.
Stay with it. And that's what did it. This
Oh,
was 32, 33 years ago. It changed my life. And what I'm trying to get at is that this was pure, unadulterated luck. I just
yeah.
happened to be in the right lab at the right time. And yeah, I knew what I was doing photographically, and I grabbed at it. It was the opportunity that I realized I needed to give it a shot, literally and metaphorically as well. And so one thing led to another, and something opened up at MIT. And when George Whiteside says to somebody, pay attention to this woman, they do. And because
Mm.
he was a renowned chemist. And I started at MIT in the Edgerton Center, which is, you're probably familiar with Doc Edgerton, who did all these incredible time lapse and freeze flash photography.
Hmm.
And the dean of science at MIT, Bob Silby, recognized that this was not just pretty pictures, that this was about communicating science not only to each other or peers, but this is a means of communicating science to the public. And
Hmm.
that is the box that I stand on. This is what I'm all about in my later years. That is to say, we have got to find a vocabulary to get people interested in science and get them to not be embarrassed to ask questions. And in my opinion, we can do that visually.
Mm.
Everybody takes pictures these days, and everybody thinks they take great pictures. And that's another conversation, whether they're great or not. But what I'm getting at with the book is to get people to see that science is literally everywhere we look.
Yeah.
Everything you see is about science, and speaking in a visual language and trying to engage the reader to ask questions about what it is that they're seeing in the book. And then what happens is you see a little piece of a picture, and you're asked, "What do you think this is?" And then when you turn the page, you see the full picture. And the book is called Phenomenal Moments. So I start off with the moment that I made the picture. Why did I stop there? And what did I use to make the picture? I used different equipment, simple equipment like phones. Most of the pictures were phones. And then
Oh,
the other piece is the phenomena, which is an explanation of why we're seeing what we're seeing. And I'm using very simple language.
yeah.
And that's the most important part. It's accessible. I'm not using jargon. I'm not using formula. It's about getting you to pay attention to the world around you.
I
So that
love it.
I love it too. I love doing it. What pushed me a little bit to do it are my grandchildren, which was kind of fun because I occasionally we would walk together and I would start pointing out things and they would sort of make fun of me. Oh, Grandma, stop talking about the science so much. But then on the other hand, they wanted me to explain more. So that
Hmm.
was another kind of nudge that maybe the young would be interested in something like this.
It's interesting the way that you approach kind of giving folks a snippet and asking them to guess, what are you seeing here? I'm looking through the book now and I'm seeing a lot of either like macro photography or like really detailed textures. And so I'm curious how you chose whether you're sort of zooming in on something, so to speak, or whether you're just showing something a little bit out of context, how
Yeah,
you chose to do that.
it's a great question because I didn't really have a method to this madness. It
Hmm.
is the way I see. Yeah, I didn't realize that until, in fact, my architectural photography is similar. I tend to go into detail. I find that I could make more sense out of something that is simple.
Hmm.
At least I think I could make more sense. So that's the way I tend to view the world. I get very confused when there's so much going on in a photograph, for example. In fact, I think that's one of the challenges that most people have when they do get interested in photography. They capture too much, and the viewer doesn't know what to look at. There's so much going on. For me, it's a means of asking the question, because if I were to look at a landscape, which is what I used to do when I photographed landscape architecture, it was chaotic in the sense. And when I made the final picture, I would always try to somehow simplify it in terms of the composition so that you can engage in the image. With
Mm.
science, I'm already viewing it on a detail, zoomed in level. And that was my natural way of approaching the project. So it was something that I've done all along and not realizing that I've been doing it.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. So I want to go back a little bit to the luck that we talked about earlier when you entered into this lab and you helped out, at the beginning with their photographs. What type of photography were you doing for the lab? Was it macro? Was it microscopy? Or was it just, kind of photography of their process?
It was a great question. It was macro photography, but
Mm.
again, using just a camera and
Hmm.
a lens that gets you a little closer. But you could see all this with your eyes.
Mm.
I'm not doing micro photography in the book. At least I
Hmm.
don't think I am. I'm trying to remember now. No, but it is mostly, this is what I saw. It was, in fact, a piece of material that had water dropped on it. You don't have pictures, do you?
I do. I do. Yeah.
That no, that is when you post this.
Oh, you mean, when people are listening to the podcast? No, no, no. Yeah, they're having to imagine. Yeah.
And here I am trying to explain with words, which I'm not very good at.
I
See
know
that?
that's always the difficulty with an audio only podcast. But
No,
hey,
it's
it's
yeah,
a skill we need to develop, right?
Right. That's actually why I'm a photographer, because I'm not very good with words. But okay, so what we were looking at was a surface that had certain areas that had water on the surface, and the water stopped at a particular spot. Let's just call
Mm,
it that. That was the science. I'll get a little deeper, like you're looking at hydrophilic areas and
mhm.
hydrophobic areas. That's all we need to know at this point. And their picture was okay, but it was frankly out of focus, not very
Mm,
good. And so I asked them, how about doing it this way? And I explained what it was that I would like them to create for me so that I could then photograph it. And they did. And we got the cover. But
yeah.
something very important happened in the process, as this was the beginning of my new life, to be dramatic but for real.
Mhm.
The first picture I made, when we sent it in to the editors felt that it was misinformational, because what I did was I colored the water blue and another drop was green. And
Mm,
the idea was to not, we were looking so that the colors would not blend together.
right.
That's the science behind this. And so the first picture I made, I thought it was kind of cool, but they didn't like it because the way I lit it was misinforming the reader, because there was
Mm,
a duality of the colors that really had nothing to do with the science. The blue had two tones of blue and the green had two tones of green. So that was really important lesson for me to start my new career with understanding the importance of not miscommunicating the information. That
right.
is to say, everything that I make for the science world has got to be honest and straightforward and clear. And so I went back and reshot it, making it a much simpler image, and that's the image they used for the cover. It was very lucky that this was my first lesson, because I've stayed with that forever, well, as long as I have this career, to be as honest as possible in how I make pictures.
Yeah, and sometimes we don't learn those types of lessons until, partway through our careers, and then we have to unlearn bad habits.
Yes. And yes, believe me, you're right. And that's what I try to teach the students. Good
Mhm.
luck on that, right? But when we are teaching students photography and graphics, and what has been an ongoing issue when we work with the students is that for a figure, for example, they put in every conceivable data point that they got, and they put in all the graphs that they were able to develop. And in the end, the figure is so packed with stuff that
Mhm.
you actually don't know where to look.
Right,
And so
right.
that's what we do in our workshops. And it's the same thing with their photography. It is to literally zoom in, as you used before, to just show me and show the reader exactly what it is that you want us to see. And whenever I have these workshops, what they do is they send me the graphics and then we discuss it. The question I ask at the very beginning is, what is the first thing you want me to see?
Mm.
And I think that's why I look at details, because it sort of makes it easier to figure out what it is that you should look at. At least for me, it makes it easier.
Yeah, I guess what comes up for me, and I'm trying to sort of put this question into words that really do communicate where my mind is going. But what comes up for me is that you're tasked, especially through a book like this, not so much with your work, although your work you're tasked with this as well. But when you write a book like this, you're tasked with sort of two sides of the equation. One side is communicating something to a, let's say, naive, and I don't mean that as a
Sure.
an insult, but like somebody who's coming at it with no previous knowledge, communicating what you want to communicate to a naive viewer so that they get the point immediately. But the other task is to work with the reader to help, I guess, inform them, train them, teach them how to look differently. And so as a photographer, you are assuming that your subject is naive, but as a teacher, you are helping the sort of, or not the subject, sorry, but the viewer. As a teacher, you are helping the viewer learn to look, right? And it's two sides
Thank you.
of the art.
You got it. That is it exactly. And the key for me is to make them look.
Mm-hmm.
And what I do with that is I use design. I
Mm-hmm.
design an image so that somebody will actually want to look, make me look,
Mm-hmm.
and then ask me a question. They're not going to ask a question unless they look. But
Mm.
then, of course, if they look and then see, that's different, and that's even better. But the idea is to first get their attention. And so I am not an artist, as I'm sure you've heard me say before or read that. I do not consider myself to be an artist because the pictures that I make are not intended as art. They're
Mm.
intended as communication of science. They are not about me. I happen to be in them because I like to say that they're beautiful. I've somehow, with composition and whatever I use, I don't even know what I use. But for the most part, I'm told that they are beautiful. And
Mm.
sometimes I really hope they are. And I think they are. But in the end, it is ultimately about my creating some sort of visual that will get your attention. And then the best of all worlds would be for you to ask a question about it.
Right.
We're
Right.
not doing that enough in the research community. This is another one of my soapboxes. I think that we have failed to get attention from the public and for them to feel comfortable enough to ask questions.
Oh, definitely. I think we're seeing a change um in the mentality with sort of a change of the guard, but historically and to some extent, there's a death grip on this in certain like administrations and certain departments. Historically, there was a mentality that sort of bench research wasn't for the public, and that if you communicated your research or you spent any amount of your career focusing on SciComm or focusing on interfacing in that way, that you were somehow kind of cheapening or like you were taking time away from the lab, like time that you should have been spending just doing your research. And I think
I,
that that was a huge uh, failure on the part of the scientific community,
no,
because it produced this ivory tower mentality.
absolutely, you are spot on about this. I'm not sure it doesn't exist any longer. I'm
Oh, it
thinking,
definitely still exists. Yeah. Yeah.
but I do think that the younger research generation
Hmm.
is different. Is I see I've been at MIT for 32 years, and I do see a change.
Mm.
You're right. It, a year, quite a while ago, the research community felt it was sort of dumbing down what is important in science. Although the realization that when you try to find a way of communicating the science, you are clarifying it in your own mind as well. It,
Hmm.
it's a means of clarification for you, the researcher. And so I'm seeing that this new generation is still young in my eyes. They're starting to understand the power of communicating to the public. The
Hmm.
problem is, and the challenge is, they're still not rewarded for it.
Right.
You're getting tenure never asks you when was the last time you spoke to the public. It's
Hmm.
it's all about publication, and whatever else is involved, but it's not rewarded. And they don't have, it's time. You have to take time to do this. And they don't have that either. I mean, I've been trying for a long time to create a course on MIT's campus about what I call visual literacy. Actually, when you see a picture, for example, take a real hard look and try to figure out if this is AI produced, for example.
Right. Yeah.
And has it been manipulated? It's been, this kind of conversation rarely takes place. And in my opinion, it should be part of the educational system. Well, we'll see how it goes. It's very, very hard to start a new program, but we'll see.
Yeah, but now more than ever, I think hopefully people start to see the relevance and the necessity of that.
I hope so. I mean, look at the mess we're in.
Mm-hmm.
It's just astounding that how mistrusted science is, and how in the world did we get here? Well, that's a 3-hour conversation. We're not going to have it.
But it is really related to exactly the work that you do and what you are doing in this book. It may not be made explicit, but part of having sort of media literacy, scientific literacy, as you mentioned before, like visual literacy, is really thinking about all of the downstream reasons that something might be communicated in a certain way. And I think we see this all the time. I mean, you mentioned your very first submission to Science, and the feedback that you got and the corrections that you were required to make. But we see this all the time when we notice that there are retractions in the literature.
Oh, yeah.
It's very easy to adjust your data and then your visual representation of your data to make it seem like it's telling you kind of whatever you want. And so it's important to there's always a bias there, right? But it's important to at least be aware of those biases and say, what is it that I'm trying to communicate?
And also to inform the reader if, in fact, there was a change. And in fact, one of the pictures I made in the book, I knew that I wanted to show condensation on a glass. Mm-hmm. When, in the summertime, there's a lot of water in the air. And when the air hits ice cold water glass, the water condensates on the exterior of the glass, coming from the air. Okay. So I knew I was going to use a picture that I thought I made. I went to my files and I found the picture I was in Italy, I'll have you know, and on the table was a water glass of ice water, and on the glass on the outside was condensation of water. However, the picture was not the way I recalled it. I could swear there was a candle in the background, a lit candle. I was romanticizing the picture in my imagination. And so I decided that I was going to AI generate the candle. The picture, which made it a much more interesting picture to look at. Mm-hmm. However, in the text, I tell the reader that that's exactly what I did.
Yeah.
I would never, ever show a highly manipulated image without explaining what I did to it. Mm-hmm. In fact, what was really, this is a sideline, but what was really interesting, not only did it was Dolly at that point, I asked it to add a lit candle. Not only did it add the lit candle, it made it slightly out of focus, just exactly the way it should be appearing. Its depth of field was less because I was looking tightly at the glass. So anything in the background would be slightly out of focus. And I didn't even tell it to do that. And it knew to do that. It's crazy. That's a whole other conversation about AI. I actually have an article in Nature about that. It's an article. Really, what happened was I was starting to wonder, am I going to be relevant? Am I going
Mm.
to lose,
Right.
because you can make every image now, you can do it. And so I actually, I had an image that I made years ago of Munji Bawendi's nanocrystals, which he actually got a Nobel Prize for a couple of years ago. And then I asked the model to give me a picture that describes, and I described what it is what I wanted the picture to be, and it was ridiculous. What they came out with was it was awful. It was not only cartoon-like and silly, but
Mm.
what the really interesting thing was that another word for nanocrystals are quantum dots. And so
Hmm.
in the vials, they had little dots, little teeny dots, and that was the picture that it came up with. And so it was ridiculously wrong. But here's the point ultimately 6 months later, I asked it again with the identical prompt, and it became incredibly disturbing because the picture was almost exactly like the real picture that I made.
Oh, interesting. And so
Probably
it probably yours was the
that's
data that it was being
right.
fed. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. It found my picture in the LLM, and it did it. And that's what's going to happen. And so I end the article by basically saying, never, never should you be able to use an AI generated image for for recording the science.
Right.
You can absolutely use AI to explain things, to illustrate things. It's really terrific. I've even started to do that myself, but never ever use it as documentation.
Hmm.
Now, how we're going to make sure that happens is a whole other conversation.
Absolutely. And how we're going to make sure, and this is where the literacy comes back in, that the viewer either takes the time to read the caption and contextualize what they're seeing, or that they sit with it for a moment and they ask themselves, is this a visual representation of reality? Is this a modeling of reality? Or is this an actual image that was taken of
Oh
reality?
boy, you're so spot on. You got it. That's exactly what we have to confront. I mean, when I give a talk, I will show, for example, the astronomical image. I think it's called the Pillars of Creation.
Hmm.
When it was taken with Hubble,
Hmm.
that's with optical wavelengths. Years later, the James Webb Telescope with infrared wavelengths shows a completely different image. And I show them
Hmm.
side by side. And I ask the audience, what is the more honest picture? Because what we are doing here is we're changing the tool that's been used. And by the way, those pictures are, color enhanced anyway. So that
Right, right.
the sideline. But the questioning of reality, I don't want to start getting too deeply into a conversation that I'd love to sit with you and talk with you more about it. But it's a whole issue of getting people to think
Hmm. Yeah.
and just start asking questions, because I'm convinced the more questions you ask, the more interested you become.
Absolutely. Yeah. The more questions well, the more that you sit with something and grapple with it, philosophically, the more questions are going to arise. Obviously, you may never be satisfied. And I think for some people, that's where the sort of psychological fear comes in. It's like,
Ah,
no, I just want to be comfortable. I just want to know and then move on. And that never happens, right? Because the more you know, the more you don't know.
really, that you're really right on that. There's a fear in there, isn't there?
Hmm. Hmm.
I didn't realize that. Thank you. That's a help. It drives me crazy when I have some really, really smart friends in my life, and
Hmm.
privileged, who are not scientists, and they don't know anything about science.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, they will describe the poetry of whoever with the iambic pentameter, but have no clue what the hell is going on in their lives.
Mhm. Yep, yep, yep. And I see this, and I think science in some ways it's unique in this, but there are a handful of other fields. I think like economics and finance is one of those fields. I think there are just certain areas in our lives that directly influence us, where either the machine that has been sort of creating the boundary between the quote unquote experts and us normies, or for whatever reason, a wall has been put up that has communicated to the public, this is too hard for you. And it's going to be too painful for you to work at this. So just leave it to us. And so there becomes this like intellectual, I don't want to call it a laziness. I don't think that's really fair, but almost like like we've been told it's okay to not have to think about those things. And if we do think about those things, they may feel threatening to us, or they may feel overwhelming to us. And then what happens? We are left in the dark. We are left confused, fearful, and easily manipulated.
Oh boy, you are right on about this. What can we do about it? I mean, that's not even rhetorical. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that, of course, that what I'm trying to do is get people to look at the world around them, and that. But is it going to be enough? I doubt it.
But it's part of it, right? It takes all approaches. And I think in some ways what you're doing, I mean, to me sort of just entering into this conversation with you freshly, but you're not even really introducing a new way of thinking to people.
Yes,
you're trying to take people back to how they used to think when they were kids.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I'm not doing anything that I can't do or haven't done.
Yeah.
Exactly. So somewhere along the lines, have we squashed that interest? I mean, is our educational system really as bad as I'm making it sound? Maybe. I mean, forgive me, teachers out there. I'm not trashing you. I'm just trying to understand, where did the curiosity stop? Maybe was it the way we teach science? I mean, I will tell you, I took every science course I could take at Brooklyn College. And I will also tell you that the physics course was not very well taught. It was all about formula. And I would bet you, if I were maybe smarter, by the way, I would have become a physicist, because I'm now fascinated with all that's going on in quantum mechanics. And do I understand it? Of course not. But I'm interested in the conversation that is taking place, and I get a little bit of it. But because, frankly, the one professor I had in physics was only talking about formula and not about concepts, and it turned me away. And that's not fair. But I just wonder, do we need to take another look at the way we teach? I'm sure people have been doing this for years, for goodness sake. I don't mean to say that I'm saying anything new, but I don't know where that curiosity was squashed. I don't know where or when.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's much bigger than, just this university or that professor. It's a national and in some respects even global phenomenon that probably, I don't want to say trickles down, but is socially influenced by so many different factors. I remember thinking, I studied science in school as well. I'm a psychologist now, and my PhD is in clinical psychology, but my master's is in biology with a neuroscience focus. And so it's like I started in psychology, got deep into neurobiology, came back into psychology. And one thing, I was able to approach it from both sides, from sort of within the science departments, and then from being an allied field, so because my undergrad minor was philosophy, I took courses like philosophy of natural science, philosophy of psychology. And I always thought, if every science student took their first, let's say you're taking physics, 101, if your first physics course was actually a philosophy of physics, and then you took, okay, now this is what we know. Let's talk about how we know what we know and why we want to know these things. And then let's talk about what we know. I think that more students would be fascinated and captured But unfortunately, we do it kind of backward. We're like, well, you need your peas and carrots before you can have the pot pie, and it's like, no. Give me a taste first.
Yeah, yeah.
Then we'll get into the vegetables.
But that sounds so reasonable for God's
Right?
Well, is it because it's just become too complex in terms of academia in general? In general, is it that we have so many layers of people involved? Is it territorial? Is it about funding? I mean,
Right, all of the above.
all of
And I
the-
think that there's an assumption that our public school education is sufficient, that by the time kids come to university, their curiosity has been sort of sparked. Their appetites have been whetted, and they know, oh, I'm so fascinated already by like the oceans, and so I want to dig deep into oceanography. And it's like, I don't think we should make that assumption, because when I taught intro bio,
uh,
I very much at the university level was basically reteaching high school biology.
really?
Oh, yeah. Like by the time most
Wow.
students come in as freshmen, you're having to ensure that there's a level set of their education, and there isn't one. So you're having to kind of go back to all of these concepts and say, okay, we should have learned this in high school, but since we all seem to be on different pages, let's make sure that we figure out what we need to figure out to move forward. And that can be tough.
Very, very tough.
Yeah.
Is it because of the testing criteria
Oh
that
gosh, I bet you that's a huge part of it. Yeah.
and,
And
and
and and social inequity. I mean, I think there's so many
there's a
different
lot.
reasons,
What are we going to do, Kara?
Well, I think what we're going to do is the types of things that I love to highlight on this show. We're going to do what you're doing here, along with so many other brilliant and innovative and creative thinkers who passionately care about
Mm,
science communication, even in spite of the concerted efforts of like the current administration, of current policy
yeah.
to quiet those efforts. So this is but one approach, but I think it's actually one of the most fundamentally important approaches, because what sense do we use unless we are an individual who was born with either a disability or a difference in how we utilize our senses? Most human beings rely so heavily on their visual sense. I mean, the brain has way more architecture dedicated to seeing than it does to the other four senses.
That's exactly what I try to argue, that we
Mm.
should not minimize the value of the visual. But I have to say, and this is getting a little personal, but I'm going to say
Mm.
it anyway. I don't think that us folks who are the visual explainers are as respected as those who write words.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
we are second class citizens.
Yeah, I
I,
think there's a view that art is not, it's somehow, it's
yeah,
soft.
yeah,
Yeah,
soft.
yeah.
There we go. And I've never been told that. No one would have the audacity to tell me that. I feel it. There's a certain, especially. No, I'm not gonna dissect it. That I was going to say a particular field. Yeah, what the
Mm-mm.
hell? The mathematicians. That it's just
Mm.
there. I have a good friend who is a brilliant mathematician who really thinks that he is explaining things to me.
Mhm.
And I have no idea what the hell he's talking about.
Yeah.
And then when I talk about, can you show me somehow visually? Oh, please, please. That's not as important. It's, of course, this is anecdotal. I'm sure there are some mathematicians who will want to make me a picture of some sort. But it's really, it is something that I feel, and I don't go into touchy-feely very much, but I do really acknowledge the fact that I am not taken as seriously as people who write books.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
as simple as that.
Yeah. No, I think that that's absolutely right. And I think that it's a long-standing bias. I think that, to some extent, I try to empathize with the position of, let's say, I think a mathematician is a perfect example, because there is some I guess, value or validity in thinking about understanding the natural world, and that sort of mathematics is a language that is fundamental to physics, right? And then physics is an understanding that's sort of fundamental to chemistry, and then chemistry is fundamental to biology.
Right.
And sort of from a reductionist perspective, you can just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper, and you almost always get to math. But that doesn't mean that the arts and like in this case, whether we're talking about science illustration, which I recently had Rachel Ignatowski on the show, and we talked all about her illustrative approaches to science, or in this case, science photography.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that these approaches can't not just better communicate, but sometimes like wildly better communicate a
Yes.
topic,
Yes.
because people just get it immediately when they can see it.
Yes, exactly. And they're not afraid of it either.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean, there's no questioning why every science textbook ever has illustrations of things that we couldn't physically image in the past.
correct. That is absolutely.
Because we need to be able to see it, even if we don't know how to make an image of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I'm glad that you agree with me.
And so part of your approach then must be okay, to the haters and the naysayers, I'm just going to keep doing it, and then watch their faces when somebody sees the science and just intuitively understands it. I mean, at a certain point, there's no sense in continuing to kind of strain your vocal cords to try and scream why this is important. You just have to do it, right? And it speaks for itself.
And so even better, by my doing what I'm doing, the hope with this exercise that I've gone through
Mm-hmm.
is that the reader will see a picture that they kind of like in the book,
Mm-hmm.
and then a couple weeks later they'll be walking around the park and they're going to see something that is familiar, and I think I just saw that in Felice's book.
Right.
I'm gonna not only look at it, I'm gonna take my own picture.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would like to happen. What do
And
you think?
I think it's not a leap. I think people will do that because people do that anyway. They just aren't noticing.
Yes, and
Yeah.
they're not seeing the information behind it,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
that they're gonna get another layer of understanding and seeing. It's like, I used to sing in an auditioned chorus. I don't
Mm-hmm.
sing anymore, very unfortunately, but that's another story. But when I go to a concert of choral music that is a piece that I used to sing, I have a whole different approach to the listening of it. There's
Mm-hmm.
the familiarity of the music gets me more engaged.
Right.
And the same thing I would like to hope will happen with these images that they see in the book.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm curious, kind of as we're starting to wrap up the hour, I'm curious, like, where did you collect images that you had in your library from your work over the years, or did you go out and shoot new pieces just for this book? Like, how did you choose the
Yeah,
sort of quality and the richness of the photos?
yeah, good question. So I did have a number of pictures that I shot through the years.
Hmm.
However, because I shot most of them with my phone, the
Mm.
quality wasn't there
Okay.
because the phone file size, that is the information that the phone took in, was
Hmm.
not the quality that I'm calling it a real camera can give me. But
Hmm.
I knew that the subject matter was interesting, so I reshot it. I reshot years later, to this past couple of years, with my phone, because the phone now is at a point where it can produce the quality of the images good enough for the book. If I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to enlarge them for 24 feet or something, I would never use a phone image. But so I would say roughly about 20-30% of the pictures were subjects that I previously had images of, but decided to reshoot it. And so the
Mm-hmm.
rest of the book is all new, because by at that time I was in fact thinking about, okay, I think I have a book here. So I'm
Yeah.
going to start really paying attention to making the pictures. But I purposefully made the pictures with the phone because I want the kids or the grandparents to make their own pictures. And some of the pictures are made, in fact, the cover of the book was made on a flatbed scanner. I'm
Oh,
telling you, you can make the most gorgeous pictures on a scanner by just plopping it down. I mean, I literally plopped the flower on the scanner and just ran the scan. And
wow.
it's, even though it's a three-dimensional object, when you use a particular scanner that you can set what is called the DPI, dots per inch, that means that this scanner can scan at a high resolution. And they're
Mm-hmm.
not crazy expensive. So I used a phone like crazy. Most of the pictures are that way. And then I used the scanner. And then I did use some macroscopic images. That is stuff that you really couldn't do without this particular microscope. But it wasn't a fancy microscope. It was just able to get closer. But for
Mm-hmm.
the most part, are their phone images.
That's so cool. I love that.
And
That's
it
so
was
cool.
and by the way, it's fun. By
Yeah. That was another question is, in your career, which has been so rich, like I'm curious how often you you just take photos for the fun of it now, or how often you're really going out to take photos because you're on some sort of project or
Oh,
assignment.
yeah, right. So to be very honest, of course, I have to be with you and everybody. Whenever I travel, I never bring a camera.
Oh, because it's like a busman's holiday, right? Like you don't want to be working on
No,
vacation.
yeah, but then occasionally, of course, there'll be this, oh my God, I got to take this, and I do. But for the most part, I don't carry around a camera because first of all, it's too heavy,
Hmm.
and it is I need to get the right shot. I don't know how to. I have not learned how to play just yet. I'd like to think that I could learn to play with my images, but
Hmm.
I'm too serious about getting the right picture. So at this point, I don't go around. I do with my phone. I do absolutely, and it's getting better and better. It's
Yeah, yeah.
I don't like what it does. The algorithms that they instituted in the cameras, I don't like. So I tell it not to do it because I don't need the fuchsia pinks that my phone gives me on a sunset. There, it's just grotesque. But for the most part, I just walk around with my phone and occasionally take pictures, but not really a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, as you mentioned, and I think it bears repeating, for our purposes, a phone is sufficient to be
Yeah.
able to explore the natural world, to document the things we want to document, to communicate what we see with our friends, our family, to communicate
Yes.
our work and our science, and just nature.
Yes.
There's enough there. We don't have to go out and spend a bunch of money.
Yes, exactly. Even if this book does well, my next book will be maybe phenomenal moments in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I like that.
Cook and it's all about science, but
Yeah.
we don't know that, and that's what I hope. Well, first things first. We'll see how this book does.
Well, on that note, I think it's a great time to remind everybody the book is Phenomenal Moments, Revealing the Hidden Science Around Us by Felice Frankel. Felice, thank you so much for taking the time to share about your work, about your history, for obviously taking the time to put together the book, and of course, for being here with us today.
Oh, Cara, thank you so much. This was fun.
Absolutely. And everybody listening, thank you for coming back week after week. As I mentioned before, this is the last episode of the year. We're off for 2 weeks over the holidays, and we'll see you back in January. I'm looking forward to that time we all get together to talk nerdy.